episode 4 of the Unrestricted podcast. We're going to be switching up the format a little bit this week. This time we're going to be kind of having a bit more free-flowing of a conversation about a variety of topics, both NFL and NBA. We're going to be starting off talking about the Indiana Pacers. They were one final team that we kind of wanted to do an in-depth team breakdown. We're then going to finish up our NBA talk for the day, talk about the Clippers and Russell Westbrook's contract. Then we're going to switch over to some NFL content, focusing specifically on the running back contract situation that has been kind of dominating the media this week. And then we're going to finish up with talking about one overrated team that I think is kind of being too highly regarded by everybody right now. And then Trent's going to give his overrated team, and that's going to be the episode for today. So to get into it, we could just start talking about the Indiana Pacers. Trent, do you want to kind of start it?
Yeah, I'd love to introduce it. I've been waiting to talk about this team kind of since we recorded episode 1 and we started doing these NBA team breakdowns. And even though we're not going to follow through and finish all the teams that we set out to, the whole team, every team in the league with all 30, I think it's good. I think we covered pretty much every team we really wanted to talk about. And while there were some contenders we may have left out, like the Celtics and stuff like that, it'll pop up in the flow of conversation as we go in the following weeks and as we continue to talk about NBA content. And as you know, I mean, the season is pretty far from now. We have lots and lots of time to cover all that stuff, so we'll let it trickle in as it does. But with Indiana Pacers, this past season, they finished 11th in the East, 35-47. It was a hybrid it's almost like a Blazers rebuilding year where they were kind of on the fence. They had some spurts where they were playing decent at the very beginning of the season, and then they dropped off in a similar fashion to the Portland Trail Blazers. And of course, they're coming off of that trade to get Halliburton and shifting the direction of their roster and getting rid of Sabonis. And I'm not going to lie to you, Kyle. When I first saw that, I was really skeptical. From both teams' perspective, I just didn't really fully understand it. Mainly from the Kings' end, I really liked Halliburton, but even though I guess De'Aaron and Halliburton was kind of a strange combo, it didn't make a ton of sense and a ton of flow. But I didn't think Sabonis would be the player that would put them over the top, but he totally ended up being that, and that's where fit comes in, and is just an extraordinary differentiator between a season to season. However, with Halliburton, he's one of the best passers, if not the second or arguably the first best passer in the NBA. It's him and Jokic, in my opinion, and there's obviously players you can throw in there as well. But his passing is absolutely exceptional. His playmaking is exceptional. He is an extremely loyal franchise player. When he was in Sacramento, he said he wanted to spend his whole career there, and now that he's in Indiana, he said the same thing there. And if you watch his interviews when he goes on JJ Redick, Podcast P a few weeks ago, and just him in the media, he's a good kid. He's like almost exactly my age, and I just like to root for him because he's just kind of like same age as me, very different positions in life, but same age. And I'm definitely rooting for him. I got to see him play my freshman year of college at Oregon State. It was actually Dad's weekend, parents' weekend, and it was Oregon State had a basketball game against Iowa State. And I'd heard about him a little bit because I'd seen him in mock drafts, a little bit stuff like that, like late lottery. So I just trying to look for players to pay attention to just as I went to the game. And if you go look at his scouting profile and his film breakdown from Iowa State, that specific game, like probably a third of the whole highlight tape is at Gill Stadium with him just dropping dots, making crazy plays. And so that was cool. I got to see it live, and I definitely saw something in him, and it's made me really start to pay attention to this team. So beyond that focal point with Halliburton, we just have the team as a whole, and we can kind of break down their numbers statistically and then talk about that together, Kyle. And we'll talk about the acquisitions and how that will change the direction of their weaknesses and kind of benefit their strengths they already have. So this past season, they were 10th in points per game. They were able to score relatively efficiently. They're 6th in assists. Of course, a lot of that comes in with Halliburton, but also with TJ McConnell, and then one of their other draft picks last year, Andrew Nembhard, who also produced there as a facilitator, and they just have a lot of cool little unique pieces that can handle the ball and play make. They were also, in fact, 10th in steals and then 2nd in blocks, which the blocks totally make sense with having Miles Turner, Isaiah Jackson, who's an extremely underrated player, and then Jalen Smith. Like potentially one of the deepest center rooms. It's really them, and then it's the Pistons, right? Which is funny because it's the same portion of the Eastern Conference. And they have those 3 young guys, but I really think they all bring something unique to the table, and they're all very interesting. And I think potentially when Miles Turner's time in Indiana runs its course, which has been talked about throughout the league for a lot in the past 3 years. I really think that either of those two guys, most likely Isaiah Jackson, if you run the numbers and his efficiency, can fill that role and potentially create cap space for them to be even better, which they already have a lot of cap space, as we'll talk about when we get into their other acquisitions. So, Kyle, what do you think about kind of the stuff I just break down, and what stands out to you about the Pacers?
Yeah. So, I mean, last year with the Pacers, kind of like you said, they were in a little bit of a no man's land area. They have, obviously, the young players like Tyrese Halliburton completely breaking out. Halliburton had a great year. He's one of my favorite players in the league. You kind of hit every point you need to on Halliburton. He's a point guard in every sense of the word. He's a true point guard, one of the best passers in the league, like you said. And he's just really fun to watch. An absolute sniper from three, although he's got a little funky of a shot. I love watching his jump shot, honestly. And the guys who've been there for a while, like you talked about with Hield and Turner, just great players. We'll see if they're in the long-term plans for this team. But like you said, they have a lot of depth at center, at power forward as well. They really have a lot of depth everywhere. There's a lot of interesting young guys on their bench that I am really intrigued with, and it's really going to be interesting to see what direction they fully want to go with. Because if they just run this season with the roster they have right now, I honestly see them as a playoff team, probably 5 through 8, somewhere around there, I'd say, in the East.
I agree.
But if they do want to kind of ship off Hield and Turner and completely embrace the rebuild, pick up some assets for those two guys, because those are guys who can play big roles on winning teams, I think. They've obviously been rumored to get traded to the Lakers for a long time. That's not going to happen anymore, but another contender who's in need of a shooter and a kind of a 3-and-D center, if you will, would definitely be interested in those guys. So if they could pick up some more assets for them, embrace a full rebuild around Halliburton, Jarris Walker, their other young guys, that's an interesting route as well. But yeah, I feel like we can kind of just get into the additions they made, because that's pretty interesting. Yeah. Obviously, drafted Jarris Walker at 7 or 8, or somewhere around there, because they had the trade with the Wizards. And me and you both love Jarris Walker. We've talked about that kind of in private, but Jarris Walker is a fantastic player, in my opinion. He's huge, he's strong, he's versatile. His jump shot looks promising. His playmaking out of the short roll looks promising. You talked about the post-Miles Turner days, maybe Jalen Smith playing the center role, and I think that one of their two backup centers is probably going to start if Turner was to go, but I kind of like the prospect of Jarris Walker as small ball center. I think that would be super interesting for this team to go with and embrace small ball, get 5 shooters on the court. I think that's really interesting. What do you think about that?
I think that could work in interchanging lineups. I don't think you necessarily need to do that, because first of all, Jalen Smith, he's the 3rd best center in their team, probably, in my opinion. And he's really good, could start on probably half the teams in the league, right? And he's like prototypical, like very athletic lob threat defender. Yeah. He's kind of like what people are looking into these days as far as a center. He's a lottery pick, all that good stuff. But Isaiah Jackson, I'm telling you right now, if you go run his numbers like per 36 minutes and per 100 possessions, oh my God, he would average like 4 blocks a game if you run the numbers and boost it in that sense, because I think he only played like roughly 20 minutes a game, so not a ton of minutes, and he's really young. He's like a player that just is under the radar. I don't know if a lot of people are talking about him. I think he's really good, and I think the Pacers know about him in the sense that he could potentially be the guy who fills for Miles Turner. But if you decide to keep with Miles Turner, I think it could work. I don't think there's like there hasn't really been a window where Miles Turner has been able to be kind of one of the main focal point pieces for a winning team in this course of the post Paul George Pacers. Yeah. So I definitely don't have a problem with that. As far as Jarris Walker, though, I just wanted to get into him a little bit. I want to be honest with you. He's probably my favorite rookie outside of Scoot Henderson and Wemby. Seriously, I think he is so unique. He's like a Draymond with powerful athleticism. Draymond's a good athlete. I'm not knocking Draymond, but even he would probably say he's in the bottom half of athletes in the NBA for sure. Right? Can't jump super high, can't jump out of the gym. He's quick and he's definitely coordinated. But Jarris Walker dude could play like probably an edge rusher in the NFL. He'd be absurd. And his touch is incredible. He's extremely crafty. I think his playmaking isn't just promising. I think it's very, very entertaining. I think he's a really good playmaker. And I think instantly he's going to have a massive impact, like massive. I think he's going to be a starter right away. I think he's going to be first team all rookie, not all NBA, sorry, first team all rookie. I'd be curious to see if he's in rookie of the year talks. I don't know if statistically it'll match up there. It's similar to a Draymond, who maybe the numbers don't necessarily pop out like that. But I'm even going to go as bold as to say I think he could be an all NBA selection defensively as a rookie. I really do. He is so dominant and so impactful as a lane threat, as a perimeter defender, as an on-ball defender, interior defense. Like, he does so much. He's so versatile. Dude, I have nothing but great things to say. And the fact that the Pacers flipped him for the 7th pick and got additional assets, I think that's just like kind of a weird. Like, I just don't know why the Wizards did that. You could have got Bilal Coulibaly there, or even 5 picks beyond that. I didn't really fully understand that, but you never know what's happening in the war room, as we always talk about. Maybe they were talking about taking them or something like that, and they just wanted to get their guy. But watch him, and he's a dude who's not got a ton of press with all the rookies that are coming in right now. But I am willing to put myself on the line. He is going to be good, barring no injuries. I'm so confident he's going to be good. It's not even funny.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I mean,
2 cents to say about him.
I don't really see a world where he's a bust or anything. I think he's at the very least an effective defender with a lot of upside in the short roll, like I said, and could score the ball decently well, jump shot. He just does everything. He's an all-around player, and he's also huge and athletic. So that's just every NBA team could use a guy like that. I'm envisioning kind of pick and rolls with Tyrese Halliburton, kind of dumping it off to him around the free throw line with one of the 3 centers in the dunker spot, and then Buddy Hield, Benedict Mathurin spacing the floor. That sounds like a great kind of base offensive set to me. But yeah, we can kind of get into their other additions right now. 2 guys I want to kind of talk about: Bruce Brown, obviously, and then Obi Toppin as well. Bruce Brown, obviously, coming off a great performance in the NBA playoffs, was pretty much the best bench player in the playoffs. He pretty much lived up to everything that was hypothesized about him in last year's free agency. Obviously gets to play alongside Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, a great supporting cast who needed a defender, a play finisher like him, and he completely excelled in that role and got paid. We're both really excited about that. We love Bruce Brown. We wish kind of our team could have got a player like Bruce Brown, but in this situation, I honestly think he would just succeed in any situation. I mean, Bruce Brown, you plug him into any NBA team, he's going to do the Bruce Brown thing, and he's going to be successful doing it. With this team, I think they had money to spend. Obviously, talk about a little bit of an overpay, but I think that's too simplistic of a way to kind of look at contracts like this. They had money to spend. They're not looking to sign a big free agent this year or probably even next year. So you can go out and get a guy like Bruce Brown who can be that tone setter on defense, who can help some of these rookies to kind of navigate screens and be in the right spots in passing lanes and in help side and things like that. And I think that's a great guy to add to this young core of promising 2-way players.
Yeah, and one thing to add, I'm pretty sure that Bruce Brown's contract has a team option after the first year, which with a team option, basically the team has the option, it's pretty self-explanatory, to either renew their contract for the second year or decline it, and they basically essentially become a free agent. From my understanding thus far in my salary cap class I'm currently in. And so that makes it a little less horrible with the 2 years for $45 million. It's roughly $22.5 million per year. Because it doesn't necessarily going to have to come to fruition year 2 if he has a drop off and doesn't contribute to winning in the same sense as we thought, or however that ends up shaping up. But I anticipate they'll renew the team option and he'll play year 2, especially because I think this team will be a 5 seed, 6 seed. I really do believe that. Mm-hmm. I think that that's about what they should be. I think a 9 seed is their floor. If they were below a 9 seed, I'd be shocked. And I really don't even think that could happen, barring no injury. If there's no injuries, I don't think they can be below a 9 seed. I really don't. I think that's how complete this roster is. And you mentioned Mathurin a little bit, and we didn't even really get a touch on him. I mean, the parallels between him and Jaylen Brown, and don't get me wrong, I think comparisons should be minimized a little bit because the mainstream media kind of gets out of hand, and even us, we talk about comparisons a lot because it's cool to kind of see, I guess, how players relate to other players and maybe projecting stuff a little bit. But as far as him with Jaylen Brown, like, he plays very similar. He's got the same build. He's got the same athleticism. I don't know if that's who he's going to be. But, I mean, the dude basically sleepwalked into 20 points a game as a rookie. Or, like, almost 20 points per game as a rookie. Like, it didn't really seem like it was extremely effortful for him to score at that clip. So I think as the efficiency goes up, as he gets to play more with Halliburton, who makes all the players around him better, I think that's a massive, massive benefit. And then last thing I'll say with this piece of kind of this topic of the new acquisitions, Obi Toppin is a very interesting player for them to add, in the sense that, think about him with Halliburton throwing him lobs.
Yeah, I know.
Like, I didn't think about that initially, because I see, okay, Obi Toppin going to the Pacers. That's like, doesn't really seem like it's a super huge storyline. And then I started to picture it. I was like, oh, there's going to be some absurd highlights. And I think Halliburton's going to bring the best out of him, as I just kind of explained with those other players. So that'll be cool. I'm really excited for that. And if you just look at this team, it's so deep. Like, they're starting 5. Let's see. So it'd be like Halliburton, Mathurin. Do you start Hield or Bruce Brown? That's where it gets a little bit confusing. Maybe Bruce Brown and make Hield your 6th man. And then you got Miles Turner and then Jarace Walker and then Toppin. So most likely you're going to have Obi Toppin, Hield, and Andrew Nembhard and TJ McConnell coming off the bench, along with Jalen Smith. Like, no matter what, you have that. And then also Isaiah Jackson.
Yeah.
Like,
they're 11 deep.
That could be the best 11 deep team. Like, they could have the best 11th best player on their team out of any team in the league. I don't know if I can name another squad that can say they have a player of that quality at 11 or 10.
Yeah.
Like, really, just think of it at the top of your head. Like, Celtics last year.
Yeah, maybe, that's the team I was thinking. I don't know.
Even that, I still don't think so. So that's interesting, and that's what kind of why I think a trade might be formulating, because I don't think that's necessarily a good thing, especially with all those guys being young, too many mouths to feed. But they also have so much cap space already, so that it doesn't even matter.
It doesn't. It really doesn't.
It doesn't matter for them. So very cool, very interesting. I'm definitely excited for them, and I'm gonna try to get League Pass and be watching them a little bit more, because it's rare we get to catch Pacers games.
Yeah, for sure.
Just highlights and maybe a few every now and then. So, yeah. Anything else you got to add with them?
No, just my last thing. You kind of talked about it, but Obi Toppin, I think he really just needed a change of scenery. I actually think Obi Toppin's really good, and Tom Thibodeau is not the coach for a guy like Obi Toppin, so I'm excited to see what he can do with a real good pick and roll partner like Tyrese Halliburton, and just in a new scenario. So yeah, that's all I got for the Pacers.
Yeah, especially Obi Toppin. He hit threes at a decent high clip in the playoffs. Like, he played pretty well in the playoffs. He had some good spurts, some memorable spurts, and I think that just showed the promise of him, and obviously freak athlete. So yeah, that's super interesting stuff. And so, as we stated in our intro, we're gonna focus mainly on the Pacers, and then we're gonna talk about kind of the Clippers and Russell Westbrook, and that'll be mainly it we have NBA wise, and then we'll move on to the NFL stuff after that. So I really have been waiting as well. The two things I wanted to talk about the most was, as I just said, Pacer stuff, and then this Westbrook stuff. 2 for $8 million after what he did in the playoffs against the Suns, to me is crazy. It's crazy to me. It's very, very borderline disrespectful that that's what he signed, and maybe that's what the market was. I don't know. Maybe he's just trying to take a pay cut so that he can be on the Clippers, and maybe there was no market for him. I don't know. But if there was no market for him, I don't understand it. It just stems from the few stints he had where he was inefficient. His shooting dropping off a little bit, but that doesn't change the fact that when he wants to be, he can be the best defender on the court, perimeter defender on the court. He's, even at his late stage in his career, is usually the most athletic player and fastest player on the court, barring De'Aaron Fox isn't on the court or John Morant. He's exceptional. If you listen to players talk about him, he's a great teammate. if you really like, Reeves would just talked about it. He was on a pod. I can't remember
Yep.
exactly whose it was. And he spent 10 minutes talking about how good of a teammate he was and how he got COVID. Like, I think it was Minnesota, and he had to stay in the freezing cold Minnesota. Reeves stayed for like 10 days. And he got multiple calls from Russell Westbrook, calling in, checking up on him, and asking him, like, you need me to send you anything? You need any help? Like, just being a moral supporter. Like, it's crazy to me that those stories don't get shared more often. I think it's bullshit. And I think the narrative is just ridiculous. And maybe he may be the most disrespected MVP of all time.
Yeah,
I honestly think so. I don't know. I mean, LeBron too, but LeBron, it's more so people just being a hater. With Russ, like, people genuinely believe it.
Russ is just like a prime example of kind of like you talked about, just media narratives being taken way too far, and not to be that guy, but people just not knowing ball. I mean, the situation with the Lakers, there's so many factors that go into play with a player like Russell Westbrook in a situation like that a lot of people just choose not to acknowledge, and that is what it is. But kind of like you said with his market and maybe taking a pay cut, I think that's honestly pretty likely. The Clippers and Russell Westbrook is the perfect marriage, and as the roster currently stands, they need a playmaker. They need a guy who can distribute and kind of just add some like dynamic ability at the point guard position. They've been in need of that. They tried the whole John Wall thing out. That didn't work. They've been kind of having a rotating door of different guards who they've been hoping can give them that. And now they got Russell Westbrook. And you saw in the playoffs when Kawhi went down that Russ can kind of tap into that kind of second gear and be back to superstar Russ and be the best player on a team who's trying to win in the playoffs. And that's exactly what the Clippers need, especially because it's not very often that Paul George and Kawhi are both on the court together. So they need a guy who can kind of step up in situations like that and offer a lot of playmaking out of the point guard position. So I think it makes sense that Russ would want to take a pay cut to be there. I think he's smart enough to realize that it's the perfect situation for him. And yeah.
And then, I mean, as you were talking about what they need, they just need someone who's on the floor.
Yeah.
They need that. The team is too inconsistent with load management and injuries and all that stuff. It's derailed their super team hopes, this window that they've had. And so they need someone who can plug and play and win them games and be a leader and be consistent. I mean, you can knock Russell Westbrook for all the stuff we just said, even if you think it's valid and you prove it. It doesn't matter. He's on the floor. He's always on the floor. Like, that is so undervalued in the NBA and not talked about enough. It really is. His health and competitiveness to that degree. So, yeah, I'm always rooting for him. Always have. I've been a Russ fan since he was in OKC early days, like prior to them making it to the finals. So, love watching him, and I always will defend him when people decide to go into that mainstream pathway of just hating on him.
Yeah, like, exactly.
And it's just, I'm sick of hearing that narrative. And I think I like how players in the league have defended him against that. Like how CP3 and KD both defended him in that first round matchup in a post-game interview. Just like saying, like, if you're talking about him, and KD said it too. I think KD said, like, when his career ends, we're all going to realize how much we underappreciated him and took him for granted. And KD said something along those lines in the interview.
Yeah.
Cool. It's always good to see them like support each other after they're kind of falling out. But
NBA players never really have anything ever bad to say about Russ, and I think that's pretty telling, to be honest.
I do too. I definitely do too. So, yeah, so that's all we got NBA wise. Now we'll kind of move into the NFL and talk about this running back situation that has been a major topic this offseason and this summer. And it's just it's such a strange situation at this level of volume with this many backs being available: Saquon, Leonard Fournette, Kareem Hunt, Zeke, and then other strange situations with Josh Jacobs and Pollard and players getting franchise tagged and all that stuff. And it's just a weird time because it's all happening at the same time, right? And in the past, we always have one or two backs like Le'Veon Bell in the past, and then also Eckler, who was in a contract dispute with the Chargers, and it hasn't been fully resolved yet still. And it's just strange because these players provide so much for their teams, and it's a weird position that they're just not financially protected, and teams continue to sign them on their rookie deals work them like a dog, and then kick them to the curb when it's done. And financially, the way it's set up without an incentive to pay them after that point, because they know that their prime has been expended at that point. Like, I'm not necessarily blaming everyone for taking that route, because that's the way it's constructed. And like, you're not going to just pay people money to pay people money. But there's a certain degree where the league in itself, it's pretty obvious where their priorities are. The fact that they're just leaving those players out to dry, and the fact that they're the ones who take the most damage, and they take the brunt of physical and CTE abuse. And when that's been such a polarizing topic over the past 20 plus years, right? And the fact that they're not protecting these players and making sure that they're financially stable and ensuring that they're cared for it's just concerning to me. And something needs to be done. They need to unionize, and I know they've tried that before, and it hasn't quite worked out. And there's tons of talk right now about what they should do, but it just, something has to happen. And so, Kyle, what do you think about that? Do you have any ideas on maybe how this could get resolved, or directions this could be going in the near future?
Yeah, I mean, it's honestly, it's complete exploitation is exactly what it is. And people don't like to kind of talk about that with people who are very rich and successful. People don't like to think about workers being exploited when it comes to professional athletes, or you're also seeing with the actor strike in Hollywood right now. It's a little bit of an unrelated topic, but people don't want to talk about people who get paid a lot in terms of these conversations. But this is exactly what it is. It's people with more money exploiting workers, exploiting people who generate that money. And that's exactly what running backs do. They're absolutely essential to a lot of NFL teams. They take the majority of hits. They have the most injury concern, most serious injuries, and that's for obvious reasons if you watch the sport. But at the same time, the way the kind of cap and everything is set up, kind of like you allude to, as a GM, as an owner, you're not incentivized to pay running backs. That's just the way it is. You're incentivized to draft a running back, maybe not in the first round, even second, third, fourth round, ride them out on their rookie deal, franchise tag them 1 year if they're good, and then go draft another one. That's the way it works, and that's so unplayer friendly. And because of that, I think first and foremost, like you said, I think the running backs need to unionize. Like you said, that has been tried in the past, kind of different positions unionizing. That hasn't been successful previously. It's still just one kind of players union as far as I know. And I think that needs to kind of change. And I think this probably is going to be the major event that changes that. I think running backs are going to unionize. You kind of heard today in the news, Austin Eckler was on a Zoom meeting with a bunch of the league's elite running backs talking about potential holdouts, things like that. And I think that's a great thing for the sport. I'm very pro player at the end of the day. And I think that the running backs need to come together and take a stand and kind of demand to be compensated for what they're worth. Now, what does that look like? That's a lot harder of a question to answer because there's so many different outcomes. There's so many different possibilities for what this could look like. What's kind of the number one thing you think should be like a first step in all of this?
Stuff that I've read about and concerns that have been talked about in the media and just throughout the league and throughout social media and stuff like that. I think maybe reducing the impact of running backs in particular, their salaries on the salary cap. Like if you halved the amount, like if they had a contract for $10 million and then only $5 million of it counted for the cap, then teams would be more incentivized to pay them rather than disincentivized because of their duration of quality and their prime. So I don't know exactly how you would get that done or you would contractually do that. But maybe think similar to the NBA and how vet minimums. Are you aware of how vet minimums work in the NBA?
Not exactly, no.
So a majority of vet minimum contracts incentivize teams to pay older guys and to have veterans rather than just paying a rookie or whatever that is player to fill the back ends of the roster. Because there's basically scales according to how many years you've played in the league. It's like, I believe it's 0 to 7 and then 7 to 9 years and then 9 beyond. It's like the maximum. And your minimum contract goes up as you play more years in the league. And so if there's a veteran, their minimum is more than the rookie. And so if there was no incentive like this where it didn't impact the salary cap, they would just pay the rookies because then it's less, right? And so the NBA has done stuff like that that's very player friendly and wants because they know that it's important for the game. You got to have veterans. The same way you have to have running backs.
Exactly.
Because it's such an important player. You can say that it's not important in the sense that you don't have to have a phenomenal running back to win a Super Bowl, but you can't have no running back. Like in offense, like as long as if you're not going 5 wide, you need a running back. Like in every other formation, right? It's so important I don't even need to explain it. It's a pivotal position in the league. Even if you can do it with rotational guys, it should be protected in the same way other positions are protected. Because if it's not, then what position is going to be next, right? And
exactly.
It just snowballs in that direction. And I just think the NFL, of course, they make more money than the NBA, but at the end of the day, I think since the narrative of sports is run so much by social media, I think that the NBA could gain some tread on them because it's so player friendly, because the players are the ones who run the show. They're the players are the reason we watch. They're the players are the reason our generation cares so much about sports. If you really look at our generation and maybe the generation above us compared to the older ones, the difference is we really care about players. They really care about the teams. Not to say we don't care about teams, but we really, really are attached to the individual players. And that's because we get to hear them talk more often, and we're so much closer to them.
Exactly.
The world has gotten smaller. But there's no scenario where leaving these people out for abuse. At the end of the day, they're people. They're not players.
Yeah.
To get abuse and then not be protected and not be secured is the right direction to go. So, of course, there's the reduction in salary cap. But another thing that I was kind of reading about, and I sent you a picture of when I was looking through the NFL CBA and reading about their rookie contracts, right? Because that rookie contract is the most important thing. That's their prime typically, because they have had the least amount of wear. It's those first 5 years. So, from my understanding, and this is minimal, I'm a novice when it comes to the NFL CBA. Basically, the maximum years they can sign to is 4, I believe, and then there's a team option after 4 to go to 5, right? And so the team option basically means, as I explained earlier with Bruce Brown, the team can choose to pick it up. And if the team chooses to pick it up, then it's an extension of that contract you've already signed before. So your 5th year could be you're getting severely underpaid if you're an 1,800 yards per game guy and you're Derrick Henry, right? And so I think something that could be simple, and I actually think probably will happen. I think this is the most likely thing that they change, because I think the players will round up and come to the conclusions we're talking about already right now, and they'll resolve something in the next CBA, even though it is in 2030, so we have a long time.
Yeah,
is just to reduce the rookie scale contracts for first round picks and then later round picks as well. It shouldn't be able to go to 5. Like the NBA it's 4. Right, it's 3 years is the extension point. I'm pretty sure in the NBA. Don't hold me to that. I'm still like I said, I'm still a novice. And it's less years, and as time has gone through, the contracts have got smaller and smaller and smaller. If you notice that, because it reduces the amount people can take advantage of you and underpay you as the market's changing. And so if it was a 3-year maximum deal or something like that, and that's on the more extreme end. Then they could re-sign with 3 years left on their prime for another 3-year deal and be making what they're worth, or at least closer to it. Still probably wouldn't be what they're worth. And that would be a big deal. Or even as simple as like bare minimum, something that could be done. And this would by no means resolve the issue. But you could just flip the team option to a player option. Then the player has the choice, right? Like, it seems like that should be a no-brainer. Like, yeah, and then it puts a little bit more control into the players' hands. They don't have to extend at that point if they don't want to, and maybe they're, because some running backs windows are a little bit bigger, like really good ones, right? So like Nick Chubb, right? Players like that, and so I don't know. That's just some ideas. I think there's other stuff to be done, and as we were talking about, and as I've said multiple times in this rant, we don't know everything yet, but we're learning, and definitely if I ever have a point personally, and potentially even Kyle has a point where we could impact this situation, I definitely will and try to help it and resolve it. I don't know how that'll look, but As I kind of go down in my legal career, I will try to make an impact in this in some way I can, even if it's just an article or talking amongst people and planting ideas out there. Because I just, as a fan, I don't like to see it. As a person who loves the game, I don't like to see it.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. You brought up a really good point with that rookie scale contract being potentially reduced for the running back position. I think I agree 100%. I think that's probably the first step. That's probably the most likely outcome. It's the most simple. It's the cleanest kind of step towards a resolution. I want to throw out a few more things that I've been reading about that have been discussed. First thing, you kind of talked about a situation where the contract could maybe count against the cap a little bit less. Something that Chris Sims talked about in a video that you sent me was potentially having more incentives in running back contracts where the incentives don't count against the cap, something that will reward productivity, such as top 10 in rushing will receive some kind of bonus from the team, and that bonus doesn't count against the cap. I think that's a pretty creative solution that rewards productivity, rewards production, which is kind of the most important thing. I think these top end running backs are kind of the ones who are suffering the most. Suffering maybe isn't the right word, but who are being exploited the most. And I think that some kind of incentive based reward that wouldn't punish teams for having high quality running backs on the roster is an interesting idea. I don't think it's the whole solution. I think it's kind of a add-on to something more substantial, such as reducing the rookie scale and things like that. But I think that's a pretty good idea. I think any sort of scenario where the running backs can get compensated without it being a financial burden on the team is probably the way things have to go, because like we said, the way the whole NFL salary cap is set up, it doesn't incentivize paying running backs. So there needs to be some kind of solution where the running back can receive more compensation in a way that doesn't hurt the team's financial standing. So one last thing, and I don't even know if I agree with this, but I've seen the idea thrown out that, like you said, running backs, their prime is pretty much from the moment they entered the league through their rookie contract and maybe plus 1 or 2 years. What would you think about potentially allowing running backs to enter the draft 1 year before other eligible players?
Very interesting. Or even allowing everyone to.
Yeah, I mean that could be a yeah.
And then naturally running backs would, right? I mean, if you paired that, like if you could just do this, if you paired that with the flipping the team option to a player option,
exactly.
That's essentially giving them 2 more years.
Yep.
Giving them 2 more years of getting. So basically, all the players that are left at the dry right now, coming off their rookie contracts, their production the past 2 seasons would be what they're getting paid for, which means they probably would have got paid.
Exactly.
I actually love that. We didn't even talk about that before going on air, combining those two ideas, but that is a phenomenal idea. And I don't know the logic behind how you actually would get that done, but yeah, I think that's really interesting. And obviously that's a pretty big change going from 3 to 2, and it'd probably be pretty interesting to see how many players can make the jump after 2 years. Like I think a player like Micah Parsons probably could have gone straight out of high school and played. And got a decent amount of minutes and been pretty damn impactful. Or like Will Anderson. Will Anderson would have gone 1 last year.
Yeah.
Right? Probably 1 or 2. And so players like that, I mean, it makes sense. They're obviously physically developed. If you can get 15 sacks on an SEC team, you can play in the NFL. I think that's like a pretty base level metric. And so I don't know. I'm never a fan of not. And I've wrote lots of papers on this growing up. Like every single time I was in like high school and stuff, and I got like a free paper prompt, I was always writing about like why college athletes can't get paid. And this is before I even understood what name, image, and likeness was, or that it was a possibility that we'd evolve into the spot we're currently in. But I'm never going to advocate that people shouldn't be paid what they're worth in anything. I mean, I always go back to just the idea of if you're a child prodigy, right, and you're an extremely good and talented artist, say you're Justin Bieber. He was 16 or 15. I can't remember exactly how old he was. Could you imagine if they just said, oh, okay, you can have no money. We're just going to give it all to the producers?
Yeah.
Give it all to Usher, all to these other people. You get nothing. And he was worth multiple millions of dollars per year at that age. And they just said, no, you can't make any of it. That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's what kind of like Will Anderson, like let's say he got injured next year. In no way, shape, or form hoping this happens or like saying it's going to happen. But hypothetically, let's say he got into like season end or career-ending injury. Like he could have been a pro 3 years ago. And so basically he got that taken from him just because of a system that you want to continue happening to generate revenue through TV contracts and for universities, which would still happen even if the players could go pro.
Exactly.
Like, why are we telling players when and when they cannot play professionally? You either can or you can't. I don't understand all these rules and legislations trying to tell people and regulate all this stuff. I don't get it. I just don't, and that's why I love the NBA model opposed to the NFL model. And it's totally different sports. Don't get me wrong. Like quarterbacks, like it's be really damn hard to play in the NFL after 1 year of college, maybe even 2. Like you kind of need all 3 or all 4 in a lot of cases. But yeah, and that's a long rant, and there's a lot of directions I could take that into. But I mean, that's what it all boils down to, having freedom. And I just think it will naturally happen because I think as fans and as people who watch the game and watch it closely, we'll push the narrative and players will get more freedoms. I just think it's inevitable. And if they don't, then I think viewership will go down.
Yeah. Yeah, I honestly agree.
Like it right now.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So we'll definitely continue talking about this
for sure
as stuff develops. I'm really curious to see if Dalvin Cook and all these other players can get contracts and get signed, which I think they eventually will. Like it'll just be middle of training camp type stuff or end of training camp.
Yeah.
Just because, I mean, if you think about it from their perspectives, I can't remember. There's a podcast someone was talking about it. Like, why would you, as a running back, go through all like hitting practices and stuff like that and take a tear on your body when you know how much you're going to get paid anyways? You might as well just join the team when you're fresh and healthy and haven't taken any hits and then go produce.
Yeah.
And the fact that they're having to think about that type of thing tells you why there's an issue.
Yeah.
The fact that Saquon Barkley has to talk about, like, one of the loyalists, probably he's a similar loyal player to like a Halliburton. Actually kind of reminds me of him when he talks about like playing for the Giants home state team. It's just phenomenal franchise player. He's the face of that franchise. The fact that he's talking about having to hold out, I mean, you can see it in his eyes. You can see the emotion. You can feel the emotion when he talks about it. It's not who he is. He doesn't want to hold out. The competitor in him,
exactly,
does not want to leave his teammates high and dry. Like, the fact that he has to do that shows you there's an issue.
All right, so for our final segment, we're going to be talking about a few teams that we think are a little overrated or just have a bit more problems that the media and everybody's kind of giving them credit for. So to start out, I could talk about my team first, and that's the New York Giants. Obviously, this is kind of a topic that relies on the situation of Saquon Barkley. I think the Saquon Barkley situation is the worst of any running back in the NFL. I think there is actually a very good chance that he holds out. I think I wouldn't say the same for kind of the other running backs that are in his situation. I think that the Giants are kind of walking on eggshells with the Saquon situation, and I think it's very possible that if he doesn't get the contract that he wants, he actually will hold out this year. And if Saquon was to hold out, I think this offense is potentially the worst in the NFL. Their running back room without Saquon is awful. They would be forced to sign one of the big name free agent running backs, which would, I mean, you could get some production out of Leonard Fournette, Ezekiel Elliott, whoever, but you're going to be bottom of the league in terms of run game. Their receiver core already is one of the worst in the NFL, highlighted by Darius Slayton, Isaiah Hodgins. They drafted Jalen Hyatt, who maybe we'll see, but I mean, he's not like a first round wide receiver or anything like that. Wan'Dale Robinson, I liked last year, coming off a torn ACL, is going to be difficult. We'll see if he can bounce back. That's an interesting player that could add some upside that I don't really see with this team right now. And then obviously added Darren Waller. I think Darren Waller is a bright spot in this offense. He's probably their best offensive player, at least skill position player. But still, Darren Waller is probably not even a top 5 tight end in the league. And if a tight end who's not even top 5 is your best skill position on offense, I think they're going to struggle with just playmaking and scoring as a whole. Daniel Jones had a prove it year last year. I'm still not sold that he's a top whatever quarterback. I think they probably should be looking to move off him in the long term. He's okay for the coming seasons. He can get you there, but he can't get you over the hump. I don't think so, at least. And then their line is okay. If you watched last year, their run game, it's not the best. It's not the worst. They drafted Evan Neal last year, hoping to get a leap from him at tackle. That would be big for them. And then their defense, obviously this is a defensive-minded team. Their defense is good. They have playmakers kind of across the board. Obviously Xavier McKinney, Kayvon Thibodeau, to highlight a few of them. Those are big playmakers at the 2 most important positions on defense, I would say, edge rusher and safety. Their defense is good. Their head coach is defensive-minded. Their defense will be good this year. However, I don't think their defense is top 5 or top 7 even. And with the level of offense that they have, I think you need a top 5 or top 7 defense to kind of get you over the hump or even get you into the playoffs. Finally, I just want to talk about their schedule, which is pretty difficult this year. I was looking at it today. They also play in a very difficult division where I think they're going to lose 2 games to the Cowboys and 2 games to the Eagles. I think the Commanders are a team that is honestly probably better than the Giants, in my opinion. I think they split with the Commanders. That's 1-5 in division. Then they have games against the 49ers. They have games against the Seahawks, the Dolphins, the Bills, the Jets. They have games against the Patriots. Maybe they could win against the Patriots and the Packers and the Saints, but maybe they could lose 1 or 2 of those too. I honestly project this team to be around 6 or 7 wins this year, and I think they're going to have a top 10 pick. I think they overachieved last year, and they didn't make enough improvements in the offseason to be where they have to be and be contenders in the NFC and in this division specifically. What do you think about the Giants?
I don't disagree if Saquon's out. I think they're going to struggle. But I think if he's there, I think that Waller, if Waller's healthy and he's there, I'm not saying it's contingent upon Saquon being there, but I think Waller will definitely be a top 5 tight end if he plays the way I think he will. He's had a little bit of injury issues as of late, but I'm a huge fan of him. I think his story is incredible, and I'm not going to say that that's going to take away from my objective analysis of him as a player, but he is so physically gifted, and some of the stuff he was doing a few years ago was just ridiculous. And I think he can still do that. I think he has at least 1 or 2 more seasons of that in him. I really, really do. And I think he just needs the right coach to unlock that. And I think Dable is one of the 7 or 8 most creative offensive coaches in the league, for sure. And if you watch them play, what they do with what they have, I think is exceptional. And their play calling, their aggressive play calling, and of course it'll come to bite them at some point. But just the fact that they would just go out on a limb to win a few games for the culture and for the city of New York. I mean, there's a reason they love him there, the diehard Giants fans, and it's because he cares and he's creative, and he really cares about the players too. I think he's going to be a really, really good head coach in this league. I think he's here to stay. I could see him being a long-term coach for the Giants, and I really do think this team, not fully because of him, but because of a few of the pieces that they have, I think in the next few years could be very good. I really do. And I agree with you with the Daniel Jones thing. I think he's a starter, low-end starter, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He could potentially even take a team to a Super Bowl. I really do think that if the roster was really, really, really good, right? And he could just utilize his run game. And like if you plugged him into the and again, I'm a massive Jalen Hurts fan. But if you plugged Daniel Jones into the Eagles offense with their run game and all the weapons that they had, that team could still probably go to a Super Bowl. I think. I think they'd be that much of a rushing threat still. And I'm not saying it's likely, but I think it could happen, right? If you can win, if you can go there with old school QBs that like Joe Flacco. If Joe Flacco can take you, I think Daniel Jones can take you. I think he's as good as that, at least. But I agree with you. If I was general manager, I'd definitely be looking for a longer term asset. I 100% would be. And even if I drafted him and just let them compete in the offseason and then just see who takes it. And if Daniel Jones keeps it, then at least he took a shot at it. But I don't know. I definitely think they're a little bit overrated. And the Saquon thing at the end of the day is going to be the X factor. But I think they'll be about what they were last year. I don't think they're going to be better. I don't think they're going to be significantly worse. I think it's about what they were last year. I don't really think it was a fluke.
How many games did they win last year?
Like
a 10?
Playoff win is maybe out of the picture a little bit, and then maybe they missed the playoffs. But I think they'll be 8-9 maybe. I think that's really what they'll be.
Yeah,
and I think they'll split between the Cowboys. I think they get a win from the Cowboys.
Yeah, they could.
Obviously, they could go 0-4 against them and the Eagles, but I also think they could steal a game from the Eagles. I think they're a tough enough team and a creative enough team where you can get one game here or there.
Yeah.
No Saquon, they're not going to win. I don't think they'll win even one out of those 4. But I think with Saquon.
Yeah. I agree with what you said about kind of the creative play calling and doing what you can do with what you got. At a certain point, you just have to have better stuff, though. And
What about the Chiefs, though? I mean, I understand there's Kelsey and you have Mahomes.
You have Kelsey and Mahomes.
But if you look at some of their red zone play calls, and the Giants have a little bit of that in them, that red zone play calling that is just really entertaining and just get the ball out quick type stuff, and just it's basically a pre-snap read, and the decision is made 2 seconds into the snap, and it doesn't matter who you put there. When there's creativity like that,
honestly, the roster is kind of constructed like the Chiefs now that I think about it. It's like completely constructed like the Chiefs. The players just aren't good enough, though. That's the problem. Like it can mirror the construction and have a drastically different result.
Question: if you flipped every player on the Giants,
except the quarterback,
no. I'm just saying, if you took all the skill players from the Giants and you kept Kelsey, so you just don't give them Waller. So basically, you keep the tight ends how they are, but you gave all the skill pieces to the Chiefs. Do you think they could have done what they did?
Are you swapping
just receivers?
Are you swapping the lines too? Okay,
just only receivers.
Yeah, honestly,
do you think the Chiefs could have still done what they did last year? Because I do.
Yeah, I think so. If you're not swapping the lines, then you keep Kelsey and the line and Mahomes. You just swap the receivers. Yeah, probably. I mean, you lose a bit, but Mahomes probably could have got it done. I think.
Another question. So if you flip Kelsey and Waller, I have an answer to this already in my head. If you flip Kelsey and Waller, do you think they could have still got to the Super Bowl? Not win it, but got there.
Are you taking into account Waller's injuries last year, or is it just a vacuum? Waller plays all the games.
Let's say Waller plays all the games next year. What you think he'd probably be post this injury?
I would say no. I feel like you might say yes if you're higher on Darren Waller, but I personally would say no. I think the gap between Kelsey and Waller is pretty substantial.
Yeah, I'd probably say no. I was going to say no, but I was just curious what you had to say about that. But I don't think, if you had prime Waller, I think you could get pretty close. You definitely get the AFC Championship. And I mean, we're talking about Kelsey, and I don't know why I necessarily made that comparison, but I was just trying to make an example about how their skill players aren't the best, but if you have the right play calling and pieces, you can still do a lot.
Yeah.
Which is why I think the NFL is so fascinating.
Yeah, exactly.
Comes in and creativity comes in a lot of ways that it isn't in other sports, right? You can't make up for that. But,
yeah. That's all I got for the Giants, though. I think they're kind of due for a regression. Shout out Mahmoud Mustafa.
All right, cool. Love it. So my team I'm going to talk about 2, but I'm mainly going to focus on the Chicago Bears. And it's mainly contingent upon the fact that people are talking about a massive leap from them and Justin Fields individually. And while I don't disagree with the Justin Fields thing, I think there will be a leap, and I think he's going to be much better, and I think he'll probably be a Pro Bowler and be a good player. And I think eventually he's going to be really, really good. I think his passing is going to develop. I just don't think adding a tackle and then, or a few linemen and then DJ Moore is going to turn a 3-14 team into like a playoff contender, wild card contender. I really just think this team is going to win 6 or 7 games still, unless Fields is an MVP candidate. Like it's like, that's what I think. I think in order for them to make the playoffs, I think Fields has to be like an MVP candidate.
Yeah,
it could happen.
Totally happen. I'd agree. I mean, the reason for the overhype, I think, is because in the past we've been seeing the dual threat QB who has been on a bad team his first couple years get a few weapons and then completely break out. You think Josh Allen, you think Jalen Hurts, and it's not a one-to-one comparison, but Fields does kind of fit into that mold, and I think that's the reason for the overhype. But I mean, I completely agree. They took the right steps to maybe building a contender around Fields, but I think they're still so far off. I think they're going to be getting another really good player in this year's draft because they're going to have like a top 8 pick or something. I think they got a long ways to go, and people are talking about being even contenders in the division. I don't see it. I think they're the clear 4th team in the division, maybe the 3rd, depending on what happens with the Packers, but I definitely think they're getting a little too much buzz right now.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that's pretty much all I have to say about them. I don't have a ton of dialogue on that. Could work to some degree, but I think 2 or 3 years away. Yeah. I think that's good for them. I don't think you should try to be that good. Like, borderline, bro. Like, they need to be trying to be in the bottom 5. If I'm in some way a GM and we're in a position where we could be in the bottom 5, you go get Marvin Harrison.
Yeah. I was just thinking they need.
Oh my god.
They need.
Then I'd be saying they're a playoff team. Just him.
They need a first-round receiver and then DJ Moore.
Yes.
Like that's
and then you're set. Because DJ Moore could be a really good. I just don't think he's a number 1 guy on a deep skill position group.
Yeah.
He's really good. He's a 1,000-yard guy. Really good at running deep routes. I honestly think he needs to get the ball more quick in quick yardage situations and get some rack. And I don't think the Panthers did that super well.
Yeah.
in the past, I think he needs to have the ball in his hands early because he's built like a running back and he kind of runs like a running back.
Yeah.
Maybe the Bears will do that and maybe they'll unlock it to some degree. But and then also Mooney too. Like that's a really good. If you had Marvin Harrison, DJ Moore, and Mooney, oh my god. And one of their backs that they drafted, or the back that they drafted in one of their young guys ends up being like a 1,000-yard guy.
Yeah, we'll see.
And then they keep building the line. Competent offense.
Yeah.
Fields elevates. They can be really good.
Yeah. Defense still got a ways to go, but just keep drafting well. That's the biggest thing with them. Just keep having good drafts and they'll get there because I believe in Fields. That's the biggest thing. I think Fields is a superstar in the making. I don't think he's there yet, but you draft a tackle, you get him a receiver. It's the first steps. Keep having good drafts, and then in 2 or 3 years, we can be having this hype. I just think people are a year too early on them.
Yeah, 100%, dude. So do you have another team that you want to talk about? You want me to just talk about my second?
You can just go with yours. I was going to talk about the Cowboys for a sec, but I think that's kind of a different discussion. I don't think they're overrated as much as I just think there are other teams better.
Yeah, maybe you just don't believe in them.
Yeah, that's more than likely what it is at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's just I obviously think in a similar fashion with them, and just because it just hasn't worked out, and I just don't think McCarthy is the answer. I just don't. Like, he's a good coach, he's good stable, he's got good history, but it boils down to what I've been talking about this whole episode: creativity. He doesn't provide a lot of creativity on either end of the ball, in my opinion. I think. So is Dan Quinn still their defensive coordinator?
I believe so.
I think they need to promote him to head coach and then get a really good offensive coordinator. And then they got a new offensive guy, and we'll see how that shapes up, and maybe that could change something. Because I actually do think, if somehow the Cowboys would have hired Dable, I would be saying that the Cowboys would be legit Super Bowl contenders, which they could win a Super Bowl. They have the talent; it's there.
Yeah.
I'm not going to choose them, but I'm just saying it could happen.
Right.
They're in real need of one of those creative offensive minds, because we're at a weird point in the NFL where it's almost looking like college football a little bit. You're not really going to win unless you have a edge play calling wise, as much so as it has been in the past. So I don't know. That's an interesting topic. But the team I was going to just talk about a little bit See, I think they're overrated in the sense that I think people aren't giving a situation as much thought and credit as they should. So the San Francisco 49ers, probably the most talented roster in the NFL, right? Them and the Eagles. It's not really close. Like they're both so absurdly stacked, and there's so many pieces that complement each other, and they've got great coaching, and they've got every single thing you need, except the most important position on the field is a little bit up in the air right now. And so you've got a crowded room. You got Brock Purdy, who, if he continued what he did last year, this upcoming season, got over his injury, and proved that wasn't a concern, replicated that, there's no issue, and they're rated how they should be. But if there's debate between him and Lance, maybe Lance doesn't pan out and you're kind of splitting between the two. Even Darnold could potentially get in there if there's some injuries. I just think that the lack of clarity there, I think, could impact the rest of the team, especially when there's this much pressure on them. As I just stated, the most talented roster in the league. So there's a lot of pressure to win a Super Bowl. They fell short last year. They lost back in 2013, right, to the Ravens. I think it was 2013.
Yeah.
And it just hasn't panned out the way it should, this new age era of the 49ers. And then they lost to the Chiefs as well later on when Shanahan became the coach, right? So there's just a lot of disappointment. But I don't know. There's something I just don't think it's quite right because of that. But if Brock Purdy's the guy, they're fine. There's no concern. There's zero concern. But that's just kind of what I think. What do you think, Kyle, about that situation?
Yeah, I mean, I listened to the Bootleg Football podcast about them a few days ago. I call them a glass cannon, and that's completely what they are. They're a glass cannon. It's this offense, if you look at it on paper, is absolutely ridiculous, and it's probably the worst side of the ball. This roster is so stacked top to bottom, but they haven't got it done, and it's because of injuries. It's because of ambiguity at the quarterback position. It's because of all of that. They drafted Trey Lance third overall, planning on him being a complete franchise quarterback superstar. Quarterbacks that get drafted in the top three, they're obviously the bust rate is somewhat high. Quarterback's a difficult position to figure out, but you have extremely high expectations for a guy like that. And that's just another example of the injuries kind of plaguing this team. Trey Lance hasn't got a chance at all. And at least the Niners fans, like my friends who are Niners fans, they'll tell you that Trey Lance is the guy. They won't tell you that Purdy's the guy. They're still believing in Trey. They still want him to be kind of the starting quarterback. And I see a lot of upside there. But I don't know, man. They just haven't been able to figure that position out for the whole Shanahan era. And they're going to have to at least get some level of consistency if they want to get back. They're going to have to get Brock Purdy playing like he was at the end of last year, or they're going to have to get Trey Lance ready to play NFL football, because if they don't, I kind of foresee a similar outcome to kind of past years. So yeah, I love this roster. Who doesn't, right? I mean, top to bottom, they have great players at pretty much every position. Their offense is extremely dynamic, especially since adding Christian McCaffrey, but they're going to have to figure, obviously, the quarterback out if they want to kind of extend their timeline and make real noise in the playoffs this year, because they're going to get there off of talent alone. It just, can they beat the top of the top in the NFL? And that's what they haven't been able to do. So we'll see if they can do that this year.
Yeah. When it matters, that's when this team is in question. Can they finish when it matters? And I'll tell you what, on that note, just to close out the quarterback discussion, I really do personally, from a personal standpoint, I believe in Brock Purdy. I think he's the real deal. I don't think what he did last season was a fluke. I think he was ready to shine when he got in there. He was decisive. He was competitive. You could see the fire in his eyes. That's not a mistake. When you see that and you feel that, if you really pay attention and you try to feel that when you're watching, it's not a mistake. So he's going to be in the NFL for a long time, I think. Whether he's going to be the guy this season or for the long term for this 49ers team will be to be seen, because it's such a weird and unique situation. Because like you said, a lot of Niners fans they're preying on the idea that Trey is the starter and he's the guy just because you gave up so many assets to get him.
Right.
And his ceiling from an athleticism standpoint seems like it's higher, right? Because he's obviously bigger, you got a bigger body, and he can, I don't even know if he can scramble better. That's the thing. Brock has got a really good scrambling IQ.
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously faster in a straight line, but yeah.
Yeah, but does that matter when it comes to IQ? Like
No,
a lot of quarterbacks are way faster than Mahomes is in a straight line.
Yeah.
Mahomes is a much better rusher because he knows when and how to do it and how to protect himself like that. And that's what it comes down to, right? So if I had to bet on it, I think Brock will be the starter, barring no injuries, or at least at some point he'll be the starter. And I think once he gets it, he keeps it, just like last season. And I don't think the efficiency is going to be the same. He's not going to.
Yeah,
he's going to be 20 touchdowns, 0 picks.
Yeah,
like nobody can sustain that. And if he does, then we're looking at a really, really special player that fell through the cracks, which is pretty damn cool. I think cool storyline. So, yeah. So thanks for checking in with us. There's a lot of great content. I really enjoyed talking about those closing pieces to the NBA and then mixing into this NFL stuff. I'm glad we got to have kind of a 50-50 split with these two sports. Going forward, we may be talking, I don't know, maybe even splashing some F1. I don't know how much you watch F1, Kyle, but maybe we could talk about that prior and mix that in. And then U.S. Open. I remember last year was the first year I watched the U.S. Open, really bought into tennis and figured out kind of how the scoring works and really figured out how the competition in that sport differentiates it from others. And I really fell in love with it last year, at least U.S. Open wise. So I'll be watching that. Maybe we'll chime into that stuff as well. And then obviously we're waiting on the Dame Lillard trade if it ever happens.
Yeah.
And we'll have a report for that when it's incoming. And then post fantasy draft for me and Kyle's fantasy league, we'll start talking fantasy. We're just not talking about it right now because we want to divulge strategies out there.
Yeah.
So we know a lot of you guys are out there listening. So lots of exciting stuff coming up. Thank you so much for checking in again. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment on any future topics you would like us to cover. And we really appreciate the support. So Kyle, you got anything to add?
Nah, that's pretty much it. Thank you guys for watching. We're looking forward to getting back at it next week and talking more sports. So yeah.